We love breaking down the X's and O's with Justin DeTavio each and every week. You can catch his breakdowns of the schemes and the plays there on stateoftheu.com on SB Nation. So this Miami offense obviously took a bit of a beating 2 weeks ago against Clemson on the road. We know what happened there. They didn't score a touchdown until an offensive touchdown until the game was salted away. They got back at it against Pitt, against one of the best defensive lines in the country, a defense that led the nation in sacks last year and going into this game, one of the best in yards per play given up. I'm going to hit you with the first thing that I noticed in watching Miami's approach to offense in the first half was every time it was 3rd and 7+, they weren't looking to throw the ball past the sticks. They were trying to pick up that first down either with the De'Ara King run, actually ran into a running back a few times trying to do that, or a swing pass. Is that the not having that that confidence in the quarterback play, or is that the receivers not separating, or some combination?
I think some combination. I think without Brevin Jordan, they didn't feel like they had a number one receiver, right? And so with him being out, I mean, you can define him as Mr. Glass at this point. Maybe he's injured. It seems like every season, right? Something happens to him. So I don't know if that's just what goes on in the weight room, the amount of practice reps they're getting, if he's just prone to injury, but what the deal is with that. But he seems to get put out every year. You don't have a number one receiver, and then the actual receiving core, they haven't had a ton of luck. Mike Harley had a really big play. It was a beautiful play. He had a nice move at the end. But where's the consistency in that? And then with King, a lot of his throws were batted down. I think people are starting to figure out kind of the trajectory. They're timing him out. Some of those defensive line guys, they get a bad rap. They're always called like kind of oafs and stuff. But, what they do, since the Julius Peppers of the world, are sort of showing the basketball model, they've gotten so much more athletic. They're more like linebackers and tight ends. And, I think you're seeing just like uber athletes, like defensive ends, one of the most athletic positions right now on the field, because at 6'5", 250 of solid muscle, you're still running with, you're doing pressure peel. So you're running up to rush. As soon as the back goes out, you peel off and cover a back in the flat. I mean, that stuff's hard to do. You're stopping on a dime. So they're starting to bat down balls and just get good timing on him. And he's not throwing the most catchable ball. There's a little wobble. There's a lot of loft on the deep ball. They're having to come back to it, which can be beneficial because you get pass interference calls. Can be beneficial because it's the back shoulder throw vibe, but also isn't beneficial when guys are just outrunning you, in a normal deep ball. You're not putting 35 yards with a good throw on it. And your shorter stuff, placement of a ball, I have a hand ball here. Placement of a ball is important. If I want to have it on this shoulder, it's got to be here because the defender is on this shoulder and he's going to bat the ball down. If it's not even here, it's batted. It has to be here. Ball placement like that seems like such a small thing, but if it is not right, even when a guy sets up for you, mesh or stick or something like that, curl, hitch, it needs to be here, because if it's not, that guy's going to bat it down. So these are those little things, it's kind of nuanced stuff, become big things when you don't do them. So I think it's a little bit of that. I think, you're not seeing as many wrinkles of run pass option, but that takes some time. Like, there's guys that won't put more than just throwing a quick bubble or smoke in for the first whole year, and then they start to add on. There's guys who just throw 5 of them in one day. Who's to say who's right?
So I saw this in the Florida State game a couple of times. I saw Rhett Lashley pull it off a few times against Louisville, and we discussed it right after the game. And then again with Will Mallory and Cam Harris. Just where it seems like it's something simple in regards to having like an H-back run behind the offensive line once the ball snapped, whether that's or having a running back off the play action leak out of the backfield, and then it's just wide open. And it's not something that you see, like watching Alabama, Georgia. Didn't happen all night. Watching a ton of college football for the last 5 or 6 weeks. Those are the noticeable times that I saw it happen, is that Rhett Lashley was able to set up the defense to do it a few times. Saw it again, like I mentioned with Florida State in the H-back. Saturday night against North Carolina. You would think that being that effective for a wide open completion that's going to run as long as the guy is fast would be done quite often. But what makes that play work?
The undying commitment to running the ball. If you've been, like you said, if you're going to set up 3rd and 6 as a run, it's been a run for 2 quarters, and all of a sudden it's not. Well, you get aggressive and it catches you. Another thing that was really good with the quarterback, little fake draw in deep throws, they did 2 different ways, right? One time the guy wheeled out of the back, the other time he came through the middle of the line. So that's 2 different looks on that. So linebacker now is kind of spying that out, right? He's got like his eye. Is it at the back? He moves over a little bit with nope. This time it's the tight end comes right through. Well, those guys were all, bid up real close to the play, so they weren't able to, recover. You saw them like try to turn and recover, and you just can't. Like at that point, you're done. That worked, and pulling the guard worked. So you see a pulling guard, your first inclination is up, 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 and that's a really good thing to do. Pull the guard, have a quarterback dip up, and hit a guy that isn't a traditional route. So it wasn't like a hand in the ground tight end running a seam, right? It was a hand in the ground tight or a winged sort of guy. He was like behind the line of scrimmage. You just call like people call him like a sniffer or he's nested, whatever, coming through the middle of the other side of the line. So pretty interesting just to see 2 variations, the same basic concept. Everything else was the same except who ran it, right? That was smart.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we love each and every day. Best bloggers, broadcasters, writers in the industry. But this segment that we do as much as we possibly can, just a little bit different. We got Justin Tavio on the line. You can catch his work on stateoftheu.com, breaking down the X's and O's. So the Canes have played 5 games. Based on what you expected out of Lashley, what you expected out of King, the other personnel groupings, what is better than maybe what you thought, or what's a surprise or maybe a disappointment when you take it all into scope after 5 games?
I think the running backs themselves have been playing well. I don't think there's anything going on there with their particular play. I think they're as good as we thought they were, right? Like 2 freshmen that are really, really good. Harris, I was really high on him. He's done a really good job. So I wouldn't say that they're doing particularly a poor job, even when they don't run for a ton of yards per carry. I mean, even some of those plays are just like, that was doomed from the start, kind of a feeling on the play. Either, there was an RPO tag and team just played them real tight on the side. They just used 6 or 7 to get through. Line isn't particularly doing a fantastic job. Play calling situationally was kind of predictable, but then all of a sudden it wasn't. Right. I think the receivers are as bad as most people thought they were going to be, the older ones. I think there's a lot of hope for the young guys, but Hal Mummy once said something about your potential is going to get me fired, right? It's never ever becomes, presentation and what is it going to be? I think with the quarterback play, I think King's finding out pretty quick that the ACC might suck, but it's not. But there are more athletic players in a given week than what the AAC can provide. Now, sure, was Memphis and UCF, are they both really fast? Yes. But what is ECU? What are some of the other teams? I love Navy football, but it's Navy football. Like, I like those teams. I like to see what UCF does. I like to see them lose, but I like to see what they do and steal it and borrow things from it. But, what's UConn, for a couple of years? What are they really providing? I think King is seeing even himself. There is given it week in and week out, and also the amount of GAs, quality control, analysts, former head coach who's just hanging out around the area. When I was at Clemson, I saw Terry Bowden every day. These guys that are old retired guys just hanging out. You have that. Hey coach, I was watching film the other day, and this guy's coached for 30 years and won a national championship. Yada yada is around to just tell you, this is what he saw on film. Well, that's a pretty cool thing to have around that not everybody gets. They're paying him in buffet. I don't know, but it's not what everybody gets. So I think you're seeing also that you're being schemed the hell out of, right? And like Brett Lashley knew that from Auburn. but he didn't see that at UConn. He didn't see that at SMU, where he just had, there's 5 guys dedicated to watching your games from 4 weeks ago or watching games from 3 years ago. You may not get that in the AAC, but you're going to get that in the ACC, especially with Clemson.
Talking college football every day here at the Voice of College Football. Justin DeTavio is on the line from stateoftheu.com. Please like, comment, share the videos out on social media, subscribe right here, hit the bell for the notifications. That way you know when we're going live. So you bring up Clemson. My thought going into that game against the Clemson-Miami matchup was that this is going to be a relatively decent game, a 2-score game going into the fourth quarter. Clemson's going to win by 17 points, but competitive. They laid down the hammer pretty quick. It wasn't like a bunch of pick sixes and it's 21-0, but you could just see the slow pull away and the gap in whether that's talent or just skill level or development or whatever it is. So in hearing from Miami fans every day, let's put the officiating part of it aside. Even if it wasn't the best officiated game and Miami took some bad calls, they still weren't going to come close to winning that game. Okay, so we had our people that basically say Miami's not good enough. This is proof of it. We just don't have the athletes. We're just not at their level. And then you have this whole contingent that says basically we do have the athletes. We're just as fast as them, just as athletic, et cetera, et cetera. Venables, Dabo, that staff just schooled us. They're so much better at developing players, at scheming, all of that. They schooled us. Where do you think we sit between those two?
I would say if you believe in 24/7 recruiting or you believe in rivals, then the talent is pretty equal, right? I mean, the recruiting classes haven't been that far off. Now, have those people lived up to, again, that potential? Well, that's on a couple of things. One, it's on your evaluation system. Do you go on 24/7 and as a coach and assume? No, you hope not anyway. Do they? Some of them do, but you hope not, right? What you hope that you do from that is, I think you hope to bring guys into camp, which was a little bit more shaky, obviously, with COVID. You hope to watch enough film. You hope you have guys who can evaluate really well. So I think, but if you're looking at raw data, it's hard to do anything besides go on those rankings, right? So as much as I don't believe in them, it's kind of all I have, right? Like there's not a whole lot to have. So you have to look at that, hold it for a very large grain of salt, right? It's the rock of salt. But then so I think they're even there, right? I wouldn't say there's a massive disparity, maybe with the guys who are playing. Miami's got 4 and 5, not 5-stars, but 4-star guys all over the place. They have highly regarded Bubba Bolden, Jalen Phillips. Those are highly regarded players. Are they all Devon Donaldson? Are those guys all living up to their hype? I mean, Bolden's playing really well, especially in a run game. Phillips does some flashes, right? A guy that hasn't really played in a long time, hasn't played a lot. He has some flashes. I think, you've seen some big flashes from King, right? And you've seen some flashes from, obviously, Harris is having a pretty damn good year. He was a pretty regarded player. Donaldson's not even playing. Where are some of these guys? So some of that is then development, right? The thing that Clemson brings to the table, it's the same strength coach for 20-something years. So that part's been established for a long time. It's the same head coach for a long time who was on staff before then. Brent Venables, who's been there since 2012. That's a long time. That's 8 years, I guess. No math major, but 8 years. So I teach personal exploration. I guess you can't see anything on the board, but and then you can see any numbers. And then Elliott, and those guys had been there. Can't think of the guy that's at USF right now, but those guys had all been there together for a long time. And Tony Elliott's still there, right? And so you've got the same offensive coordinator for a long time. That offensive line coach has been there forever too. So there are people that have been there for so long. Your language is all the same. And that's cultural language and that's schematic language. Nick Saban said, our offense and our defense use all the same language, right? It's the same terminology. So when Sark came in, he has on his call sheet Sark language, Saban language. So he wants to call a play, he's got to look at it and go, right, just to make sure that, I'm sure he's getting it by now, but, to make sure he doesn't mess it up. So that helps, though. So if I'm coaching offense and I say, hey, that guy's the never-ending football argument Is he in a 7 technique or a 6-eye, right, as a defensive lineman? Well, if I'm on offense saying it's a 6-eye and you're on defense saying it's a 7, that's one more translation that's to go through my head as a player, especially if I start off as a linebacker and become a tight end or vice versa, right? Or an O-line, D-line, or running back to a corner. If I'm on the scout team, all those things have to be translated again and again and again. So we're all in the same language. That's going to really drive our development, right? Because now it's just second nature. The cognitive part of it is so fast, right? But there's also a ton being done in the world of S&C, strength and conditioning, where, I mean, they move, man. I mean, if you watch ETN run, it is like a textbook, beautiful perfection. There's not a thing to say about the way that he runs. Trevor Lawrence had a couple funny runs when I've broken him down where his arm gets all wonky and he almost falls over and then he comes back. And he's real lanky and tall, you know, he's a quarterback. But, you know, if he could clean some of that up, man, you think he's good now. His movement efficiency is better. He'll be less likely to get injured. And he'll all around be a better runner. And that just goes for mobility's sake to get out of the pocket and everything else. But if those things are so good, so I think it's development. You know, I think it is. It's development in so many aspects. It's the strength and conditioning portion. It is the language portion. It's having the same scheme, allows you to have the same drills, which allows you to have the same mentality going into them. They're being coached to hard the same. Yeah, you're being out-developed. I mean, I don't know if anybody should really be shocked that Clemson, having the same coaches and all this success for as long as they have, is out-developing 128 other teams. I mean, no shit, right? But, you know, sorry. But, you know, it is what it is. But I think that if you can try to get closer to that, you'll be in good shape. So hopefully a guy like Lashley wants to stay for 5 years. And hopefully, I don't see Blake Baker going nowhere, but hopefully those guys want to stay. And it gets better and better and better. Or like the program says, you know, not the movie, the book, you know, the actual leadership book. If it is a bad hire, get rid of him as fast as possible. Danny knows, right? They dumped him. They get it. Just, you made a mistake. Time to go. The quicker you dump somebody like that, the better off you'll be.
So you said you don't necessarily believe in the recruiting rankings, but they seem to be pretty much on par with what happens on the field. So you got your outliers. Texas is underachieved forever, and they bring in top 5 and 10 classes. USC's in that ballpark, but nobody's close to Texas when it comes to underachieving for a long period of time. And then on the opposite end, you got Wisconsin developing top 10 to 15 teams in the nation with like top 40 classes. And Michigan State used to do it under D'Antonio and a few others, Stanford at one time. But the rest of it doesn't seem to fall in line. Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State's here. And then you drop down a level and you got Notre Dame, Penn State, Michigan, Auburn, those kind of schools. And then right on down the line, it seems to be more accurate the closer you are to the top. Mm-hmm. But then as you drop down, certainly, you know, schools like BC have out-recruited or out-developed at times with 7 and 8 win teams, like classes that rank like 70. But you don't think that they pretty much fall in line?
You know, I think that the blue chip ratio stuff that Bud Elliott does is good. I think there is a cutoff. I think there's like a 50% of your roster has to be a blue chip player. I think he's right. Like you know, I think he said the closest team to the 50% line was like Oregon, but they also had Mariota. You know what I mean? Like a generational sort of player for them. You know, and a system. You know, that was a pretty consistent system of the guy had been coach, offensive coordinator, the other coach moves on, offensive coordinator, and then the other guy moves on. You know, they've been hiring those seated head coach sort of thing for quite a while. So that was a benefit. And the same DC was there for a long time too. Like, God, I can't think of his name, 34 defense guy. He wound up going down to UCLA, maybe even. He might even be down there right now. I can't think of his name, but he was there forever. And so you did have the same scheme and system. So I think that helped them. No, I think there's a cutoff. I think that players, I think it's an aggregate thing, right? I think certain players, it's hard to say like, well, you have so-and-so, why aren't you winning a championship? Well, because the Lorenzo Lingard kid hasn't even played at Florida either. You know, like some of these particular players. I think, yeah, sure, if you have, you know, 85 guys on scholarship and 62 of them are 4 or 5 stars, it's going to work out eventually, right? Because you can let 3 transfer and 3 flop. And Bobby Bowden used to say something about like, you know, if you have 90 guys, you know, 30 or whatever are going to wind up no matter what their star ranking is, or 30 are going to wind up being just off, never play. 30 are going to be really good role players, and 30 are going to be starters or stars, right? And it doesn't really matter what star ranking it has, just how it's going to work out. Because 30 guys are pretty much going to have to consistently be starters and stars. 30 guys are going to be role players who might start eventually, sort of thing. 30 probably are going to flop because there's just only so many guys who can get on the field, right? Most of us don't consider Don Beebe to be like a legend who only plays special teams, especially in college, right? Like, usually a college starter becomes a special teams guy in the NFL, not usually just a forever special teams. I'm the best gunner in the country, you know. That doesn't usually make it. I'm not saying it doesn't. It just doesn't usually make it. So, yeah, I think in Alabama, so Clemson, again, they don't recruit to anywhere near the level of their success, right? Like they might have the 17th recruiting class with the 11th and the 7th, but they're number 121. Oh, should the 17th be able to finish number 1? I don't know. Like that's, so you have to start looking at aggregate, I think, and not player to player. The one that matters the most, I would say, has to be quarterback, right? I mean, you go from Watson to Bryant to Lawrence, and you saw who's driving the force behind that thing. If you've got, lights out elite athlete at that kind of a position, I guess you're going to be successful, right? Like, Ohio State usually, Urban Meyer had how many damn great quarterbacks around that place at one time? Miller, Barrett, Jones. Say what you want about Cardale Jones. It's not like he didn't play in the NFL. It's not like he didn't play in the XFL. He's a professional football player. That means he's in the elite, right? So, he was an elite player. So, Jones, Miller, JT, he had
Queen Haskins.
Fields eventually was there. Burrow was there.
Burrow never smelled the field, yeah.
Burrow never smelled the field, is now doing pretty well as a starting NFL quarterback. Think about that for a minute. And then Tate Martell is a total flop. So, and all those guys, he's probably the highest rated one and wound up doing the least amount. I don't even know if he's out of Miami. I don't even know if he tends to keep going. So, again, it's aggregate, right? But that quarterback position is obviously the one you can't miss on. And, you look at some of these schools, they miss on quarterback all the time, or you see 24/7, or Elite 11 is hilarious. You can see some of those times, that Yogi Roth guy is talking about mental toughness, yet his Elite 11 has like 75 transfers in like 2 years. I don't know what's mental toughness to you. I think it's the ability to come back and play and perform with mental focus under duress. So if you can perform under duress, and you have that ability to be, elastic and come back, getting beat out and then boo-hooing and disappearing and going to other places and still not doing, it's Elite 11.
If Miami's to reach its offensive potential this year in a reasonable way, not something that's beyond them, based on what you've seen and what the potential to be, there's that word again. But anyway, what area do you think has the most reasonable expectation of growth, development, and reaching a higher level than what it's performing right now? Where do you think they can get better and be a better offensive team, 7 games from now, near the end of the year?
It's still timing and stuff. I think, you run into Clemson, they're going to make you question everything, right? Like, obviously at a smaller scale, but I've been a coach at multiple levels all over the place in multiple states. There are games that make you wonder, like, well, damn, do I even know what I'm doing? And that's a Clemson game. They just did it to Georgia Tech. They make you wonder, damn, do I know what I'm doing? And then you sit down for a minute and then you watch it again and you're like, God, it's here, it's this, it's that. But they've also got 10 more years in this program than we've got, one and some change. And, yada, 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 yada. And eventually you notice, like, oh, we're far. We're 70 something points away, or we're 50 points away, but we're not that far. Like, you can feel it in a couple of years that you can get that win against them and give it back to them, And I think that's time, man. It's going to take time. It's going to take consistency. I think, keeping a guy like Lashley there, if they can do it, and his assistants, that's going to help a ton. But if this becomes a revolving door, it's going to be really hard for offense to get it. So long story short, I guess consistency is my thing. Stick with it. Know what you're good at. Believe in what you do. Make little adjustments. Don't wholesale change everything. Just make little adjustments. If you've got to scale back the tempo a little, scale it back. You see a lot of people don't run the constant tempo anymore that he does. They line up, play quick. They don't huddle. They hit a big play, they run up to the line and they hit that next play because they know, everybody knows when we hit a big play, our next play is very basic. It's 2x2 split zone with a smoke RPO. That's what we're going to rep all week. Every time we hit a 25-yard play, we're going to line up and run that exact play, and it's on set. Now, give the ball, run it, look over. They're going to have two guys on them. They don't have anybody on them. Throw it out there real fast. It's an easy read. It's an easy play to run. If somebody does make a mistake because they're a little gassed, that split zone H-back coming across knocks him out, and you can probably at least get 0 to 2 yards. You're not going to lose 10, right? So you have your quick, this is what we do every time we hit a big play. And so I think that's the kind of tempo you want to see, and then slow it back down after a bad play. You have a near interception. You want to really line up and just run some crap again? No, slow it down. Let them get calm. Relax. They're men, but they're just as close to young adults as they are to being, the line between being professionals and being a high school kid, they're in the middle. So some of those guys are 18. You're going to have to realize some of those guys are basically high school seniors plus. So they're men, but we got to, kind of wedge that gap down a little bit.
Yeah, just because they're on ESPN and Fox and ABC on prime time and the stadium's packed and the place is going crazy and a zillion people are watching, we sometimes forget that and hold them to some ridiculous standard of perfection. And, we got to realize there are mistakes going to be made. And as I like to say all the time, Justin, it's not like selling insurance or doing whatever your job is that you don't have resistance to your job. No, very few of us have resistance, meaning like somebody who's trying to stop what we're doing while we're working. No, our success depends generally on our productivity, our intelligence, our creativity, our stick-to-itiveness, all those things. But there's a winner and there's a loser. And all those kids out there and all the coaches could be doing max level, studied, did everything, lifted all the weights, did everything they possibly, but somebody's going to walk away from that night a failure. If you're just looking at results, somebody's going to be a failure. That's what they're putting on the line when they go out there.
Yeah.
All right.
Overtimes
and State of the U with Justin Tatavio. We appreciate it, Justin, every time.
Yep. Have a good day.